Okay.
Welcome everyone to hi June. Yeah, big pictures. I think it's 13th webinar now. It's brilliant to have a few people on today, and we're going to be talking about a massive topic. And I've been presenting it to others today and saying how embarrassing it is. We only have half an hour to cover these topics, but I realise it's valuable time for people. And I want to get started quite quickly and straight into it. So without doing many introductions, what I want to do, I said in the email when I sent it out, I want you, if you would, to think of 3 words which mean something to you in terms of what diversity is. And I'm going to go to a dictionary definition, but before I do that, and I'm going to push the board out a bit and be a bit adventurous here. I want Martin to say a word first. I'm going to follow him. Lisa, you're going to say one of your words. Then it's going to go to June for one of hers, and then it's back to Martin. So it's going Martin Rooney, Martin Johnson, Lisa Childs, June Lancaster, and then back to Martin. So, Martin Rooney, if you're ready to start, I'm looking for one word that means something in terms of diversity for you.
Acceptance.
Individual.
Respect.
Oh, I was going to say respect.
No repetition allowed.
Honesty, I think. Honesty.
Beautiful.
Recognition.
Opportunity.
Uniqueness.
Okay, agreement.
Difference.
Open-minded.
Individuality. Oh, sorry.
Lisa Childs, wrong order. Please behave. Open-minded.
Individuality.
Wow.
Good one.
Behaviour.
Beautiful. That's fantastic. That's based on a game. It does 2 things. Zip Zap Zop is a game you might look up on Google. It's just an icebreaker to get us kind of knowing that we're all here. There's other people on the line. It works in a remote facilitation. I'm just going to share with you, and I didn't note those words down, but I will do, of course, on the recording. If I go to the dictionary definition of diversity, which I think is interesting because I had a thought around this. I've just pulled it up on screen. I've just gone into Google, typed it in. When I read this, and it'll be interesting when I reflect on the words that we used in terms of definition of diversity, what struck me is it immediately starts listing in that second sentence what are like physical attributes, beliefs, and then it used this lovely word, ideologies. And what I thought when I looked at that is that when I do my work, and I think the people I like to work with is, I'm only ever interested in the kind of the view or the idea or the point of perspective. And I think genuinely when I was reading this, I went into it thinking diversity is something that generates innovation, ideas, point of perspective, whereas the definition is one of physical attributes and beliefs. And that surprised me a little bit. And I just wondered, now you reflect on your words that you said you may have written them down, if any of you want to jump in and kind of reflect on what we said versus that definition, just in case you have a view that's maybe different to mine or has some relation to it.
I think when you see these kind of definitions and you hear people talk about diversity in this kind of way, I think it's quite inflammatory.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't actually, I think it starts to point you into a direction which you may not have necessarily gone.
Can you give me a little example of that, June? Without being too sensitive about it, just to bring that alive a little bit.
Well, I think in life you meet lots of different people. And as you know, I'm a nurse by background, so met lots of different people from different, and the actual race, ethnicity, gender, all those kind of things were not the issue in terms of whether they're diverse. It was much more about their culture, their change, the way that they did things, and what I could glean from that in helping to care for them.
I love that. And were they expressing that verbally to you and in their kind of verbal, their signaling, their body language and things?
Yeah,
but it was
absolutely.
mostly verbal signaling in terms
Signaling
of
through body language and through verbally what they're saying to you, because that's how that's how I think I picked up what kind of reaction they wanted from me, which obviously in that kind of job is really important.
That's brilliant. And have you found that useful in the business situations you find yourself now in terms of the soft skills and the emotional intelligence? It's almost a loaded question, but I guess those are transferable skills into the work that you do with businesses now.
Yeah, definitely, because I work with a diverse group of people. But I think primarily a lot of them are engineers. And engineers and nurses think very differently, and it's about how do I utilize what I've learned over the time to actually be able to work with these guys, and they are mainly guys. That's a very loaded thing, isn't it? But they're mainly guys. But and I think so I think it helps me in terms of understanding where they're coming from, what they're trying to achieve. And how I interact with them is really important. Yeah,
it's not that often you get two very different types of jobs in a career, if you don't mind me saying, June. It's quite eclectic, kind of two roles there in terms of nursing and the work I understand you to do now. So that creates an interesting angle. I'm just thinking whether Martin or Lisa has got anything. Martin, have you got? I saw you wanting to jump in maybe there.
I work in the NHS, and we really go to town on the diversity stuff at the moment. There's all kinds of initiatives and kind of awareness raising stuff that goes on, organisational development support, training, and opportunities for managers to become aware of how to promote diversity in the workplace. I'm going to say something ever so slightly controversial, Martin. I hope you don't mind. But I sometimes wonder if it becomes a preoccupation that distracts from some of the other things that organisations should be aspiring to as well, and can get in the way of things like, for instance, efficiency, professionalism, being customer focused, for instance, things that organisations pretend to do and often don't do very well, and perhaps it's because they're busy being right on in terms of diversity, and they kind of take their foot off the gas on the kind of more business facing and more essential aspects.
Well, could I be controversial back and say that could be a feature of public sector rather than private sector?
Yeah. Yeah, you
let's
can.
move on. But I do like the point, and we will pick that one up. But that's lovely. Lisa, yeah, Jim, go ahead.
Sorry, Martin. Can I just make a comment? I think when you talked about professionalism, the other Martin, I think that's part of what I was trying to say, probably not very well, because I think as a professional in whatever discipline, you should be able to manage the kind of diverse situations and the diverse people that you meet with. And that, I think, I went through a lot of diversity training, but I actually thought, well, I think this is what I should be doing anyway, just as a human being and a professional. And I actually think in some ways the training actually focused on the wrong things. I have to point out this is a very long time ago because I'm much older than you. So it could be quite different.
Well, we weren't taking any view on that because it's about diversity, Jude. So, the age.
Yeah.
Not an issue. Look, I need to move on a little bit. I love the conversation. Lisa, from your perspective, I heard you jump in earlier and I may have interrupted you. Did you have a point to make?
Well, no, it was just the fact that I was wanting to agree with what June said about the fact that somehow looking too closely at diversity can be distracting in that it starts to make you think about people in terms of categories. And in many ways, what we're trying to do is ignore those categories and just treat everybody the same. So I can understand that thinking about it too much can be distracting. The way that I like to look at it as well is the fact that diversity can also mean that people have different values. And it's those sort of values and thoughts and opinions that can be equally as diverse as somebody's race or sexual orientation or background or whatever that might be.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Oh, we've got the lights come on.
Okay.
Someone's put 50p in
Yeah.
the meter. Oh no, June's. I thought it was Lisa's. Sorry. Fantastic.
No, it's me.
And you've brought some Christmas spirit to the webinar as well, June, with the Christmas tree in the background.
Not intentional, Martin. I've just realised, but yes.
It is the pre-Christmas webinar. People will be watching, maybe expecting some tinsel and a beautiful thing on the top of the tree. So June's brought along the tree. So that's fantastic. So to jump into the ideas thing, I always I could converse and chat all day, and sometimes I like that and I get distracted. I just want to bring it back to an idea. I always like to bring ideas to the kind of table to create discussion. And I'm going to share with you something around 3 different points I'd like to make in my experience about putting aside kind of the physical attributes and the beliefs for now, how I found working with Big Picture helps me in terms of working with diversity and embracing it. And those 3 words that I use, that is seeing the individual, seeing it as an opportunity for maybe creating innovation and being open-minded. And what I realized, I'm just going to share with you this, which is we all see things differently. So this is an illusion that's very commonly used. I don't know what you see there. You've probably seen it before. So your brain will be flicking between the one thing and another. I don't know whether any of you predominantly see one more than the other. I don't know if you just want to call that out.
The rabbit.
I'm seeing more duck.
Yeah, the bird, the duck and the beak.
I saw the rabbit first and then the duck.
and it's interesting when we flip between, and it's a bit of a kind of pithy example, but what the point is there, that with Big Picture and the work I do, what I realize is by giving people the opportunity and a framework to work within, and these kind of things behind me, I just happen to use symbols to do this. What I'm doing is I'm giving people the ability, and they may not have had this previously, I'm giving them the ability to, whatever, irrespective of their background, their knowledge, their beliefs, their education, any of that, I'm giving them a chance to express themselves and give them from a point of perspective, which I think is reflected in my 3 words, which I'm open-minded about what come out from that. And actually, it's interesting when I look at the personas we use with Big Picture. I like to work with organizations that are people first, values based, but more importantly, the third of 3 is organizations that are willing to act on what their employees say and think. Because I think sometimes with surveys and question and answers, you don't get that chance. And I was kind of challenging myself about how I encounter and deal with diversity. And it is through seeing that people look at things differently and actually giving them that chance to express themselves. And I'm just going to bring up a second point before we get into a little practical example. And I'm just flicking between something. Just bear with me. So if I bring this up, it was something, I don't know how close you follow, but I've been coming up with these collaborative shapes. And this is one I came up with, which was the comet. So the point I'm making here is not only do people potentially see things differently, they also engage differently. And what I mean by that is when I wrote this little blog around the comet, as I called it, these are 3 people at the front here in a huddle. And if I just bring my little highlighter pen up, if I just draw something on here, these 3 at the front are in a kind of huddle, they're working together, they're engaging differently to these guys at the back who are probably just stepping back and reflecting on the work that is getting done. And the reason I mention that is because I think there's two levels to this, which is not only do people see things differently, and we saw that through the illusion there, that you've got to see the same information might be seen differently by different people. Also, the way they then process that information and work together is different. So some might step to the front. And if I were to ask you all, where do you predominantly do your work in that kind of group format? Do you normally stand at the front in the middle of the central huddle? Or are you more a reflector and somebody towards the back who likes to maybe be a bit more thoughtful and then come at it a bit later? And it's like that introvert, extrovert piece. So not only do people see things differently, they engage differently. And the third point I was going to make is that I only see it working well where, and this may have been touched upon earlier, where the corporate kind of philosophy, that the senior management, the company practices, allocate some time and invest some time in allowing people to have that space to be able to develop their own view and work in the way that they want. And I'm going to jump into a little practical now. So just before I ask for a reflection or two, and I'll go in reverse order, just have a piece of paper handy, because I am going to ask you to do something. So whilst one of us is talking, just get a piece of paper handy, and we'll end in a practical example. So Lisa, over to you. Do you see some merit in those 3 points I made about any examples of people seeing things differently or engaging differently, or the kind of senior corporate philosophy? Big question, that one.
Yeah, I mean, from a personal point of view, I can see that I'm probably more the sort of person that is in the thick of things. Where I've struggled in terms of management of a team is to look at a team and think that there are members there who are less comfortable about speaking out, and how you get the best out of them, because it's true that even though they might not be saying a lot, they've still got equally, if not more, valuable contribution. And it's quite often those who are in the background being more thoughtful about it who actually have the most value to add. And the difficulty as a team manager is working out how to get it out of them in a way that's still comfortable for them.
Lovely. Yeah, I like that. Excellent. June, to you.
June's muted.
I think you've gone mute, June.
Yeah, okay. I think naturally I'm sort of working together with other people is how I naturally respond. But for various, and I've always done that in my working life, but for various reasons now, I have to spend a lot of time working on my own. So sitting and reflecting and thinking about everything that's happened is one, challenging. I've always reflected, I've always gone away and reflected, but now I do it quite a lot more. And I think in terms of management and getting people to engage, I think it's about, again, go back to the honesty and trust issue, in people accepting that you are part of a team. I don't know if I'm answering the question really, Martin, but I think it's about how you respond as a team member rather than a boss.
Interesting. Yeah, that's good. It's a point of reflection, June. That's all it is. There's no right or wrong. It's interesting. I'll, in my own way, watch this back and pick some themes out of it, which is why I like the conversation to bounce around, because it often throws up a point or two which I need to rewatch, read the transcription, and that's how these things move on. And I can often either see the theme within the big picture approach or add to it and then connect back with the person that raised it. And that's how I like to roll, because that's how I learn and that's how the thing works. So I'll certainly be unpicking this. From your perspective, Martin, just before we go on to the exercise, any thoughts from you?
Just a brief one, really. I mean, personally, I'm pretty adaptive. I'll happily be part of a group kind of model and approach. I'm happy to stand back and watch and wait and adapt my input. Often, actually, personal reflection depends quite a bit on mood for me. Depends on kind of where I'm feeling about things at the time. Will depend how I kind of behave in a given kind of work situation around stuff like that. And my reflection on it, Martin, would be about, in terms of these kind of different styles and approaches and attitudes towards diversity and inclusion in a project or a team environment. I still think that one of the key issues for us as leaders is to make sure that that the team remains effective as a whole and performs, the requirements that the business needs, as well as being, right on and inclusive and accepting diversity. And sometimes seeing us losing focus on things because we're being distracted in some ways by the newest fad.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, thank you. I'm aware of time because we're having a good chat and we're almost there. So I want to end on a practical exercise. I've just changed camera. I've got a little camera, so don't be alarmed. If you've got a piece of paper, there was a prop. I've got a line running from left to right across the page. Not important to the left and important to the right. And there is we use big symbols in big picture, and you don't necessarily need to use symbols. You can just, that's gone very, you can just use just writing. And what I'm going to do is to flick that camera off. So if you've got that line across the page, what I want to demonstrate is that points of difference are interesting rather than seen as right or wrong. And I think that's one little point that big picture does very well, that is often not scalable in a business because it takes a lot of investment to give people the chance to express themselves and more investment to work out what to do with it. So I'm making a link here, and I want to use a simple example. So if you've got that line across the page, I'm just going to go through the big picture symbols. So the first one is team. So for you as an individual working in a particular situation, position the team symbol or just write team on the line, whether it's more important or not important at all in terms of being a successful outfit. How important is the team towards that? So you may take a view, it's very important because the team has to be functioning for it to be successful. So it gives you a bit of a calibration. I'll move on to the second one, and I'm going now through the big picture symbols, and they're all chosen because they are elemental, and that's the first time I've used that word because I heard it this morning and I thought it was a good word. Elemental meaning it's an element, a key element, a fundamental part of the business. This symbol behind me here, this yellow one, is the customer. So relative to the team, how important is the customer to a successful outfit? And I'm using the word outfit to mean anything, whether it's a business, the wider team, the community. There's no right and wrong answer here. I just want you to score them relatively. We'll go into the 4 remaining big picture symbols, which are technology. Relatively, how important is technology for a successful outfit? How important are measures? That's the black symbol you see here. There's a mirror effect on my camera, which is why my hands look like they're waving about. That's the measure symbol there. So again, relative. And then with the last 2, we've got our money and process. And we use this as a bit of an icebreaker when we're in a group, because relatively what's interesting is how those are then set out on the page. So I've not done mine, but I'll just give you a minute. In fact, if I go over to Lisa, if you've been following along, just before I put mine up, because I've been talking, not writing, you can't show yours because you've not got your camera on. Do you just want to kind of read them from most important to less important?
Okay, yeah, for me, the most important is the team, because if you get the team right, then everything else should fall into place behind it. And that's the same for customer service and happiness and, well-being and everything. If your team's right, then they'll do a good job and everything else should follow on. Behind that is customer. People say customer first. I put team first. Then I suppose technology, measures and processes probably equally towards the least important end, and money is sort of fundamental to it all, really, because you've got to have money to be able to deliver all of that. And what we're trying to do at the end of the day is generate value, whether that's monetary value or otherwise. So I guess that's sort of comes beyond customer.
Now that's brilliant, Lisa. What I've picked up on that and the kind of conversation that then develops is, I say to you, what's the same there is pretty much everything other than 2 points of interest, where I would have measure more important up the line, because you need to know what good looks like. You need to be able to measure good. That would be my justification for that. And we would then have a knockabout chat about how that's relative to the others. And then money, I would have on mine lower down, because all of the stuff to the right, if that works, the profit, the turnover, everything else, the money works. Money is kind of the outcome and the result. And because of that, we would have a chat in a group with others, and that's where, and then we'd have a lot of similarities. I'll just share mine from Martin and from Lisa. From your perspective, does what I've said make sense? Which one would you want to come back on?
I suppose the money side of it, I'd thought slightly differently, in that I was thinking value rather than money.
Okay.
So I probably just didn't approach that in the right way.
No. Well, the use of the word right and wrong is interesting, because it's what I like is a point of perspective which leads to an interesting conversation, and that's the point of it, because it's that thing about neurons that wire together. So by us having that conversation, we understand the business better because we've had the conversation, as opposed to it being a right and wrong thing. If I just try and draw out one for time for Martin first, just 1 point of difference or similarity.
Very similar. Yeah.
Excellent. Sorry, go ahead.
I just put money up as a separate thing, slightly ahead of team.
Okay, interesting. And see, at that point, you and Lisa and I would be having a chat, and I think I'd be thinking, I'm being influenced and swayed in a positive way here, and I'm understanding your motivations for making that observation. And I think in an open discussion, you've got to be open for that. So whilst it's not right and wrong, it's a bit of groupthink to define the term money better, so you can position it in a way that makes sense to more people. Martin's got his Christmas tree up as well. I think we've all gone. I haven't got a Christmas tree, sure. I feel I'm lacking a Christmas tree. And
I would have if my camera was working.
Oh, you see, I'm the one without a Christmas tree. June, too, I know you're on mute, so just make sure you come off mute before you say anything, if you've got a point to compare.
What I've put is money as the least important, and then process and measures, and technology in the middle, because we're a technology-based company. And so the expectation from customers and staff is that the technology will be working well, and the team and the customer at the end are equal.
Brilliant. That's great. I love the fact there are similarities and differences, and this is about people seeing things differently, adopting some form of language, but then being able to develop it themselves, and they can only do that through conversation. It's very human, very personal. I'm going to run for the line now, because I'm keen to leave it as a kind of half an hour session. We started a little bit later. There's two things we would do with this in Big Picture World. We could, as an icebreaker, and imagine people in the room with these kind of bigger symbols so they can actually walk around the room. We may add an axis up and down to say, well, is it different for the individual, the team, and the business? We could do that and add a different axis, and actually people walking around the room then interact and network with each other. So when they get down to the paper version of Big Picture, they're comfortable with both the layout of the template and also the symbols. And the other thing we would do is use the challenge and opportunity symbols, which we end with Big Picture, to say, once you've added that to the kind of template, what are the challenges and opportunities that are presented by what we've discussed? And we would certainly add, and we haven't got time for this today, but we would add that to the big picture template, as opposed to it being on just a white page there. We would add it to the template with the customer journey going through, with marketing, operations. And I just want to end with a point to bring it back together, because maybe it's not being linked to the business, and this is about diversity in a business and an organization. And I think, Martin, you've been particularly clear on that it has to link back to the business. And I think the little anecdote I wrote down, and I'm just going to leave it as a rhetorical kind of question, which is, if you were thinking about the business and you had 10 people from the business and you were talking to them, I think from the points we've made today, it's clear that if we said the customer care team are somehow down, they can't use their system, they're offline, we need to be aware of the different people we offer that information to in the business. We'll all come up with their own point of perspective, challenge and opportunity for what that means. And I think instead of seeing it as a broadcast one-way offering, invest in the time in hearing what that means to people in a way that's quite elegant and smart, so you can then feed back and understand the impacts and consequences of that are not diversity in respect of the physical characteristics and ideologies. It's more about giving everyone that point of perspective and voice, and that's my form of diversity that I'd like to have put a bit of an angle on it today. And that's just, I'll kind of leave that hanging, and that brings it back. I don't want you to think it's an abstract point. It actually does come back to very real situations that you have to react to in a business, and we expect a lot of employees to just react and do the right thing when we're not actually maybe engaging them in a two-way dialogue, and they're already disenfranchised and just think, well, whatever, who cares, doesn't affect me, I'm in marketing. Well, it actually does affect you, because everything's connected together in my head. It's systems thinking, it's everyone contributing to the greater good. So I am now over time. Are there any reflections, any summary points before we sign off?
No, I found it interesting, very interesting, listening to other people. Yeah.
I like to open it up. Thank you for being a part of a conversation. I always try to make them a two-way dialogue, because it's more interesting, we learn more, and actually when you see themes coming up, people are more likely to kind of jump in and want to be part of something, as opposed to seeing it as a broadcast mechanism. It's not meant to be. Big picture will never be that. It'll always be a two-way dialogue. So I'm going to wish you all a beautiful weekend, and thank you for joining, and health and happiness and all of that. And we will catch up soon, and take care. And thanks for joining.
Thank you, Mark.
Everybody.